Change your thoughts and you change your life. That's not just a nice saying, it's real psychology at work. The way you think every single day decides how you feel, how you act, and how far you go. The problem is, most people don't even notice the patterns running in their heads. They keep repeating the same doubts, the same worries, and the same stories that stop them from improving. This video is about breaking that cycle. It's about helping you see the hidden patterns that drive your behavior and showing you how to replace them with healthier ones that actually support your goals. You don't need complicated ideas or long lectures. You need clear steps, honest reflection, and practical tools you can use today. If you've ever wondered why you get stuck even when you try to move forward, this will give you the answers. Stay with me, you'll see exactly how understanding your thought patterns can unlock real personal improvement. Chapter 1. Identify hidden thought patterns that shape daily behavior. When we talk about changing our lives, most people look for some big secret or some complicated strategy. But the truth is much simpler. The way we think, the patterns that run through our mind every single day, have more influence on our future than almost anything else. These patterns are often hidden. They run quietly in the background, shaping the way we act, the way we speak, the choices we make, even the opportunities we see or don't see. If we want to improve our lives, we have to learn how to identify these hidden thought patterns and take charge of them. Every person carries around invisible scripts that guide behavior. You might not notice them because they're subtle. They show up when you automatically say, "I can't," before you even try. They show up when you expect the worst before the situation has even begun. They show up when you hold yourself back because of what someone told you years ago. These are not just random thoughts, they are patterns, repeated lines your mind has learned to play again and again. And until you become aware of them, they will continue to run your life. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you done something automatically without even considering another choice? Maybe you reach for your phone every morning before you even stand up. Maybe you say yes to things you don't want to do, simply because that's what you've always done. Maybe you avoid taking on a challenge because somewhere inside, a voice repeats the same story. You're not ready, you're not capable, you'll fail. These habits of thought become habits of behavior. They set the limits of your life. But here's the good news. Once you identify these patterns, you create a chance to change them. Awareness is the first step to freedom. When you see that you're not simply bad with money, but that you've been repeating a thought pattern of scarcity and fear, you can start to build a new way of thinking. When you notice that you automatically talk yourself out of opportunities because of old beliefs, you can begin to build the courage to say yes where before you would have said no. Most people underestimate the power of thought. They think actions alone make the difference. But every action starts in the mind. Every choice comes from a thought. If you repeat weak, doubtful, negative thoughts, you produce weak, doubtful, negative actions. If you repeat strong, encouraging, clear thoughts, you produce strong, encouraging, clear actions. You cannot escape this law. Your patterns of thought build the foundation of your life. So how do you identify these hidden patterns? The first step is to slow down and pay attention. Human beings are often rushing through life, reacting to one thing after another, never pausing to ask, what was I thinking before I did that? If you take time to reflect on your day, you'll start to see certain thoughts that keep coming back. For example, maybe you notice that every time you think about starting something new, you quickly hear, "It's too late for me." That's a pattern. Or maybe you realize that whenever someone compliments you, you instantly think, they don't really mean it. That's another pattern. Journaling is a powerful tool here. Write down what you think when you wake up, what you think when you face a problem, what you think when you succeed, and what you think when you fail. Look at your words on paper. They will reveal the patterns you couldn't see in your head. Once you see them, you can ask yourself, do these thoughts help me improve? Do they move me forward? Or do they keep me stuck where I am? Awareness by itself can be uncomfortable. Many people don't like to look at their own thoughts, but the discomfort is part of growth. Imagine realizing that for 10 years, you've been repeating the belief that you are not worthy of success. That realization can hurt, but it also opens the door to change. You cannot fight what you cannot see. Once you see it, you can confront it. Now here's the next step. After identifying a pattern, you must question it. Don't take your thoughts as facts. Just because your mind says you'll never succeed doesn't mean it's true. Ask, where did this thought come from? Who taught me this? Is it based on reality, or is it just an old story I've been carrying? Most of the time you'll find that these patterns are not based on truth, but on old experiences, fears, or influences from people who were themselves trapped in negative patterns. This process of questioning weakens the grip of the old pattern. Once it's weakened, you can replace it with something better. If you discover the thought, I can't handle stress, you can replace it with, I am learning to handle stress one step at a time. If you discover the thought, I'm not smart enough to succeed, you can replace it with, I can learn and grow as much as I need. You're not pretending or lying to yourself, you're choosing a more helpful and realistic thought to repeat until it becomes your new pattern. Remember, your mind learns through repetition. The negative thoughts you've been carrying didn't appear overnight. They grew stronger because they were repeated again and again. In the same way, positive and empowering patterns don't appear overnight either. You have to repeat them until they sink in, until they become natural, until they guide your behavior without effort. That's how you rewire your life. Think about the difference this can make. Imagine someone who has always believed, I am unlucky. Every time something goes wrong, they reinforce this pattern. They say, see, I knew it. And as long as they think this way, they will fail to notice the opportunities right in front of them. Now imagine that same person starting to say, I create opportunities by taking action. Over time, this thought becomes their new pattern. Instead of waiting for luck, they take initiative. Instead of complaining, they look for options. The same life, the same circumstances, but a new mind, and therefore a new future. This is why identifying hidden thought patterns is so powerful. It's like discovering the blueprint behind your behavior. Once you see the blueprint, you can decide whether to keep building from it or create a new one. If the pattern is healthy, like thinking I can handle challenges, keep it. If the pattern is destructive, like thinking I always fail, replace it. Step by step, pattern by pattern, you reshape your life. Many people make the mistake of thinking they have to change everything at once. That's overwhelming and usually leads to giving up. The truth is, even changing one thought pattern can transform a whole area of your life. For example, shifting from I can't speak in public to I can learn to express myself can open doors to new jobs, new relationships, and new confidence. One shift creates a ripple effect. Now let's talk about the emotional side. Our thought patterns are not just intellectual, they are tied to feelings. That's why they can be so strong. When you believe I'm not good enough, you don't just think it, you feel it in your body. You feel tight, heavy, small. When you believe I can grow and improve, you feel lighter, more open, more ready. Paying attention to your emotions is another way to identify hidden patterns. Ask yourself, when do I feel most discouraged? What thought is behind that feeling? When do I feel hopeful? What thought is behind that feeling? By connecting thoughts and emotions, you uncover the patterns that quietly drive your life. Another important part is environment. The people you spend time with, the words you hear, the things you watch and read, All of these influence your thought pattern. If you're around people who always complain, you start to think in terms of complaints. If you surround yourself with people who talk about possibilities, your mind starts to see possibilities. Identifying thought patterns also means identifying the influences that feed them. Sometimes the best way to change a pattern is to step into a new environment where healthier thoughts are encouraged. The work of identifying hidden thought patterns is not just about self-improvement, it's about self-leadership. When you know how your mind works, you stop being a follower of old beliefs, and you become the leader of your own future. This gives you resilience because you can catch yourself before you fall into negativity. It gives you confidence because you know you can build new thoughts when you need them. It gives you direction because you see clearly which patterns move you forward and which hold you back. This is the essence of personal improvement, understanding yourself deeply enough to guide your own growth. Success is not about luck or chance. It's about the patterns of thought and behavior you choose to build, day after day. If you want a better life, don't just focus on what to do. Focus on how you think. Identify the patterns, question them, replace them, and repeat them until they become natural. Change is possible for anyone. You don't need to be special. You don't need to wait for the perfect time. You just need to start by paying attention. Notice what your mind is telling you. Catch the hidden patterns. Decide which ones deserve to stay, and which ones must be replaced. Then practice the new ones until they become strong. This process is within your reach, and it has the power to transform everything. You are not stuck with the thoughts you have right now. You are not defined by the patterns of the past. You are capable of seeing your mind clearly, of choosing better thoughts, of building a stronger inner foundation. The journey begins with awareness, with honesty, with the courage to face your own thinking. Once you do, the rest of your life opens up in new direction. Improvement is not about perfection. It's about progress. Identifying hidden thought patterns is the starting point of progress. With each pattern you uncover, you take back a piece of your freedom. With each pattern you replace, you build a new layer of strength. And as these changes add up, you will look back and realize that your entire life has been reshaped, one thought at a time. Chapter 2. Challenge distorted thinking that fuels constant self-sabotage. One of the greatest challenges in personal improvement is not the obstacles outside of us, but the distorted thinking patterns that quietly sabotage us from the inside. Many people imagine failure is caused by lack of resources, lack of talent, or lack of opportunity. In reality, the deeper problem is how the mind interprets events, how it twists situations, how it feeds doubts, and how it convinces us to stop before we even begin. Distorted thinking is the hidden enemy of progress, and unless it is challenged directly, it will keep repeating the same cycle of self-sabotage. Distorted thinking shows up in many forms. It can sound like, if I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't try at all. That is all or nothing thinking. It can sound like, because I failed once, I will always fail. That is overgeneralization. It can sound like, they didn't answer my message, they must not respect me. That is mind reading. The problem with these distortions is that they feel real. They create strong emotions, and those emotions guide our actions. We don't question the thought because we're too busy reacting to the feeling, and by reacting to these distorted thoughts, we sabotage ourselves again and again. Self-sabotage is not always dramatic. Often it is subtle. You promise yourself you'll start a new habit tomorrow, but when the morning comes, you tell yourself, I don't have the discipline. That one thought keeps you from even trying. You want to apply for a new job, but the thought comes in, I'll never be chosen, and so you don't apply. You want to improve your health, but you think, I've already failed too many times, and so you don't make the effort. None of these are external barriers. They are internal distortions that paralyze you before you take action. To break this cycle, the first step is to recognize distorted thinking for what it is, a trick of the mind. Distorted thinking exaggerates, assumes, and misleads. It takes a small piece of reality and stretches it until it looks absolute. To challenge it, you have to pause and examine what you're telling yourself. Instead of accepting the thought, you question it. Is it accurate? Is it fair? Is it helpful? This shift from blind acceptance to critical awareness is what weakens self-sabotage. For example, if the thought is, "I always fail," ask yourself, do I really always fail? Can I list times I succeeded, even in small things? By answering honestly, you break the absolute nature of the distortion. If the thought is, "Nobody likes me," ask, is it true that nobody likes me? Or are there people who value me that I'm ignoring? By exposing the exaggeration, you create room for a healthier perspective. This process requires honesty and courage. Distorted thoughts can feel comfortable because they confirm old beliefs. If you've believed for years that you're unlucky or unworthy, any evidence of failure will seem to prove the thought correct. Challenging it feels uncomfortable because it means questioning part of your identity. But if you want personal improvement, you have to choose growth over comfort. You have to be willing to say, "Maybe I've been wrong about myself." When you begin to challenge distorted thinking, you will also notice how automatic it is. These thoughts appear quickly and without invitation. They are habits of the mind, built through repetition. Just as a habit of action can be broken, so can a habit of thought. But breaking it requires awareness and deliberate practice. Each time you notice a distorted thought, write it down. Seeing it on paper separates you from it. You realize it is not you, it is a pattern, and if it is a pattern, it can be changed. Now, once you've recognized the distortion, the next step is to replace it with a balanced thought. Balanced thinking is not about blind positivity. It is not about saying everything is wonderful when it clearly isn't. It's about choosing accuracy and fairness. If the distortion says, "I'll never succeed," the balanced thought is, "I might not succeed immediately, but I can improve with effort." If the distortion says, "One mistake proves I'm a failure," the balanced thought is, "One mistake is feedback, and I can adjust." By repeating balanced thoughts, you create a new mental habit that supports progress rather than sabotaging it. Another important step is to connect thought and action. Distorted thinking thrives in the space between idea and action. You think of doing something, the distortion interrupts, and you give up. The way to break this loop is to act even when the distortion is present. For instance, if the thought says, "I'll embarrass myself if I speak up," challenge it by speaking up anyway. Action is a form of evidence. When you take action, you show your mind that the distortion is not always true. Over time, repeated action weakens the power of distorted thinking. It's also important to recognize how distorted thinking connects with emotions. Negative patterns create anxiety, frustration, hopelessness. These emotions feel real, and they can drive behavior more strongly than logic. But when you remind yourself that the emotion is based on a distorted thought, you separate the feeling from the truth. You might feel hopeless, but that doesn't mean the situation is hopeless. You might feel incapable, but that doesn't mean you are incapable. Learning to notice this separation is one of the most liberating skills a person can develop. Many people sabotage themselves through fear of judgment. They imagine others are constantly evaluating them, criticizing them, or waiting for them to fail. This is another distortion. Most people are too busy thinking about their own lives to spend much time judging yours. Yet the fear of judgment keeps people quiet, holds them back, makes them hide their true potential. Challenging this distortion means asking, whose opinion truly matters? Am I living for approval, or am I living for growth? The moment you shift your focus from imagined judgment to real progress, you weaken the grip of self-sabotage. Another common distortion is perfectionism. The belief that anything less than perfect is worthless causes endless delay and avoidance. You say, if I can't do it perfectly, I won't start. But this is sabotage in disguise. Progress only comes through starting, through mistakes, through practice. Challenging this distortion means embracing imperfection as part of learning. Remind yourself that imperfect action creates growth, while waiting for perfection creates nothing. There is also the distortion of comparison. You look at others and think, they are so far ahead, I'll never catch up. This thought kills motivation before it even has a chance. The truth is, everyone starts from a different place, with different experiences and opportunities. Comparing your beginning to someone else's middle is unfair and destructive. To challenge this distortion, bring your focus back to your own journey. Ask, am I better today than yesterday? Am I moving forward? Personal improvement is not measured against others, it is measured against yourself. When you consistently challenge distorted thinking, something powerful happens. You begin to build trust in yourself. Self-sabotage thrives on mistrust. The belief that you will let yourself down. But each time you replace a distorted thought with a balanced one, and each time you act in spite of distortion, you prove to yourself that you are reliable. Over time, this builds confidence. You no longer fear your thoughts because you know how to handle them. Challenging distortion also improves relationships. Many conflicts are fueled not by reality, but by assumptions and misinterpretations. When you learn to question your own distortions, you stop reacting to false stories. Instead of assuming someone's silence means rejection, you wait for clarity. Instead of assuming criticism means hostility, you see it as feedback. By breaking distorted thinking, you create more peace, more understanding, and more honest connection with others. This process is not quick, it takes daily practice. But the results are profound. You go from being a prisoner of your own mind to being the master of it. You go from sabotaging yourself without realizing it to guiding yourself with clarity and strength. Improvement becomes possible not because the world has changed, but because you have changed the way you think about the world. Every time you challenge a distortion, you create a small victory. Those victories add up. They turn into momentum. They build resilience. They give you the ability to face challenges without collapsing under the weight of false belief. Life is not free of problems, but with a clear mind, you meet problems with solutions instead of sabotage. The most important thing to remember is this: distorted thinking is not who you are, it is something you learned. And what is learned can be unlearned. You are not your doubts, not your exaggerations, not your fears. You are the person who has the power to notice them, to question them, and to replace them with thoughts that serve your growth. That is the path to personal improvement, and it begins the moment you decide to stop letting distortions run your life. Challenging distorted thinking is one of the most practical steps you can take for lasting change. It requires awareness, honesty, action, and repetition, but it gives you back control. It frees you from cycles of sabotage. It builds a mind that works for you instead of against you, and with that foundation, everything in your life becomes possible.
Chapter 3. Reframe automatic thoughts to support personal improvement goals. Every person has a constant stream of thoughts moving through their mind. Most of these thoughts appear so quickly that we hardly notice them. They come automatically, often in reaction to events, people, or even our own memories. These automatic thoughts can be supportive or destructive, helpful or limiting, empowering or discouraging. If they lean negative, they quietly pull us away from progress. If they lean positive and constructive, they move us closer to our goals.
The ability to reframe automatic thoughts, to catch them, reshape them, and direct them toward growth is one of the most important skills for personal improvement. Automatic thoughts are fast because they are rooted in habits. They are built over years of repetition, experiences, and influences. You walk into a room full of strangers, and before you say a word, a thought appears. I don't belong here. You face a difficult task, and instantly a thought rises. I can't handle this. These are not carefully considered judgments. They are instant reactions created by old beliefs, often formed in childhood or during moments of failure. And because they come so quickly, they often feel like truth. But they are not truth. They are habits of the mind. And like any habit, they can be changed. Reframing an automatic thought means pausing long enough to notice it, questioning whether it is accurate or useful, and then replacing it with a new perspective that supports growth. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending everything is fine. It means choosing to view situations through a lens that keeps you moving forward rather than holding you back. For example, when the thought appears, I always mess things up, reframing would sound like, I sometimes make mistakes, but I also have successes, and I can learn from this experience. The event has not changed, but the interpretation is what shapes emotion, motivation, and action. Many people underestimate the influence of automatic thoughts. They assume progress is about willpower or strategy. But imagine trying to reach a goal while every automatic thought in your mind is discouraging you. No matter how strong your plan, you will constantly feel drained. Now imagine the same goal with automatic thoughts that remind you of your strength, your past improvements, and your ability to grow. Suddenly, the path feels possible. That is the difference reframing makes. It turns your mind into an ally instead of an enemy. The first step to reframing is awareness. Automatic thoughts are quick, but they leave a trace in the form of emotions. If you suddenly feel discouraged, anxious, or hopeless, that feeling was triggered by a thought. Pay attention to your emotions and trace them back. Ask yourself, what was I just thinking? You may realize the emotion was not caused by the situation itself, but by the way you interpreted it. For example, failing a test may not create despair on its own. The despair comes from the automatic thought, this proves I'm not smart enough. Once you uncover the thought, you can work with it. After awareness comes evaluation. Ask, is this thought accurate? Is it based on facts, or is it a quick judgment? Is it fair to myself? Does it help me grow, or does it hold me back? Most automatic thoughts collapse under this kind of questioning because they are built on exaggeration. They turn one mistake into proof of permanent failure. They turn one rejection into proof of universal unworthiness. By evaluating them honestly, you break their power. Once the distortion is exposed, the next step is to reframe. The key is to choose a thought that is both believable and supportive. It should not be blind positivity. If you fail a test, telling yourself I'm a genius will not stick, but reframing as, I didn't prepare enough this time, but I can improve with better preparation, is both truthful and encouraging. It turns the event into a lesson instead of a sentence. Reframing also works in daily habits. Consider health goals. The automatic thought might be, I skipped my workout, I'm lazy. Left unchallenged, this thought creates guilt and discouragement, which makes it harder to start again. A reframed version might be, I missed today, but one missed day doesn't erase my progress. I can get back on track tomorrow. This balanced thought prevents sabotage and keeps momentum alive. Another example comes from relationships. An automatic thought might be, they didn't call me back, they don't care. That thought leads to resentment and distance. Reframing could be, they might be busy. I'll wait before assuming. This small shift reduces unnecessary conflict and helps maintain connection. Again, the event hasn't changed, the call was missed. But the thought you choose shapes the outcome. The power of reframing lies in repetition. Just as old automatic thoughts were built through years of repetition, new patterns require practice. The first few times you reframe, it will feel forced. You may even doubt it, but with consistency, the reframed thoughts begin to feel natural. And once they feel natural, they become your new automatic responses. This is how you transform your inner dialogue and align it with your personal improvement goals. Reframing is also connected to long-term identity. If your automatic thoughts constantly tell you that you are weak, unworthy, or incapable, your identity becomes shaped by those beliefs. But if you reframe those thoughts into reminders of growth, learning, and resilience, your identity shifts as well. You begin to see yourself as someone capable of change, someone who can face challenges, someone who deserves better. And when your identity changes, your actions follow. Some people worry that reframing means ignoring reality. That's not the case. Reframing is not denial. It is choosing the most constructive interpretation of reality. If you lose a job, the fact is you are unemployed. That doesn't change. But the automatic thought might be, I'm worthless. That is not fact. That is interpretation. A reframed thought might be, this is a tough moment, but it opens the chance for something new. Both acknowledge reality, but only one supports improvement. Reframing also requires patience with yourself. Automatic thoughts are deeply ingrained. You may catch yourself thinking negatively again and again. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you are in the process of change. Every time you notice and reframe, you are building strength. Over weeks and months, the old patterns weaken, and the new ones strengthen. Personal growth is measured in these small victories. One of the most empowering parts of reframing is that it puts you back in control. Automatic thoughts can feel like chains, pulling you in directions you don't want to go. But once you learn to reframe, you realize you are not trapped. You can choose. You can create distance between thought and action. You can decide how to interpret your experiences. And in that choice lies freedom. Automatic thoughts influence not only emotions, but also motivation. Consider someone with the goal of learning a new skill. The automatic thought might be, I'll never get this right. If they believe that, they stop practicing. If they reframe to, it's hard now, but with practice I will improve, they stay motivated. The action that follows is completely different, and so is the outcome. By reframing, they stay aligned with their goal instead of abandoning it. Reframing also teaches resilience. Life will always bring challenges. You cannot control every event, but you can control your interpretation. Automatic thoughts often make challenges seem heavier than they are. Reframing lightens the load by reminding you that difficulty is part of growth, that mistakes are part of learning, that setbacks are temporary. With this mindset, you face challenges with strength instead of despair. The process of reframing is not limited to negative thought. It also applies to neutral thoughts that can be shaped into motivators. For example, the automatic thought might be, I have a lot to do. That by itself may create stress. Reframed, it could be, I have important tasks that will move me forward. The tasks remain the same, but the motivation changes from pressure to purpose. Another benefit of reframing is clarity. Automatic thoughts often blur judgment. They make you react emotionally rather than thoughtfully. By reframing, you slow down the process. You step back, look at the situation from another angle, and respond with intention. This creates better decisions, stronger relationships, and more consistent progress toward your goals. Reframing is also contagious.
When you practice it, people around you notice. They see that you don't spiral into negativity the way others do. They see that you interpret setbacks constructively. Over time, your example influences them to reframe their own thoughts. This creates an environment of encouragement rather than discouragement, of solutions rather than problems. For personal improvement goals, reframing is a daily practice. Each morning, notice your first thoughts. Are they supportive or discouraging? Each evening, review moments where your automatic thoughts held you back. Ask how you could reframe them for next time. This daily reflection strengthens your awareness and builds consistency. Over time, reframing changes not just thoughts, but behavior. It leads you to take more action, recover faster from setbacks, and pursue bigger goals. It reduces the power of fear, because fear often comes from distorted automatic thoughts. It strengthens hope, because you train your mind to see possibilities instead of dead ends. And it increases discipline, because you learn to encourage yourself instead of discouraging yourself. Reframing automatic thoughts is not about pretending life is easy. It is about building the mindset that makes improvement possible. It is about noticing the instant reactions that would normally sabotage you and choosing a response that keeps you on track. It is about taking responsibility for the one thing you can always control: your perspective. When you commit to this practice, you unlock a powerful truth. You don't have to be a prisoner of your thoughts. You can direct them, reshape them, and use them as tools for growth. The goals you set for yourself become more reachable not because the world has changed, but because your mind is aligned with your progress. That is the real power of reframing. With consistent practice, the voice in your head that once said you can't begins to say you can learn. The thought that once said you'll fail again begins to say you're getting stronger. The pattern that once discouraged action begins to encourage it. These changes accumulate, and one day you look back and realize that the person you've become is the result of thousands of reframed thoughts, each one a step toward your improvement. This is how you support your personal goals with your own mind. This is how you build a life where your thoughts no longer sabotage you, but instead lift you, guide you, and strengthen you every day. You cannot stop automatic thoughts from appearing, but you can decide which ones to keep and which ones to transform. That decision, repeated day after day, creates the path to personal growth, resilience, and lasting change.
Chapter 4. Observe inner dialogue to uncover unconscious mental habits. Every person carries on an inner conversation from the moment they wake up to the moment they fall asleep. This dialogue is not always loud, but it is steady, shaping moods, decisions, and even identity. Most people rarely stop to listen carefully to what they are saying to themselves. They move through the day, responding to situations without realizing that their reactions are driven by mental habits formed long ago. To truly understand yourself and make lasting improvements, you must learn how to observe this inner dialogue and uncover the unconscious habits that guide it. Inner dialogue is the voice that says, "I should hurry when no one is rushing you," or "I don't deserve this" when something good happens. It is the quiet line of reasoning that justifies staying in a comfort zone or explains why you should give up before starting. It is also the voice that can remind you of your strengths, encourage you to try again, or push you to take responsibility. The difference lies in the habits that have been built into that voice. Some are constructive, others destructive. The key is awareness. Many unconscious habits come from repeated experiences. If as a child you were often criticized, your inner dialogue may habitually criticize you even now. If you grew up praised for hard work, you may habitually push yourself even when you are exhausted. If you once failed in a painful way, your inner voice may now habitually warn you that you will fail again. These habits operate below awareness, making them difficult to recognize. You cannot challenge what you cannot see. That is why observing inner dialogue is so powerful. It brings unconscious patterns into the light. One practical method of observation is slowing down moments of decision. When you are about to act, pause and ask, what am I telling myself right now? For example, you hesitate to speak up in a meeting. If you stop and listen, you might notice the thought, if I say something wrong, everyone will judge me. That thought reveals a habit of fear-driven self-silence. Without pausing, you would only feel the hesitation and assume it was natural. With observation, you see the hidden dialogue that fuels the hesitation. Another way to uncover mental habits is reflection at the end of the day. Review situations that created strong emotion. Ask yourself, what was I thinking before I felt that way? If you felt anger, maybe the inner dialogue was, they always ignore me. If you felt hopeless, maybe the thought was, this will never get better. When you collect these reflections over time, patterns emerge. You begin to notice that your inner dialogue uses the same language again and again. That repetition is the sign of an unconscious habit. It's also helpful to notice the tone of your inner dialogue. Is it harsh? Is it supportive? Is it doubtful? The tone often reveals whether the habit is helpful or harmful. A voice that constantly says, "You're not enough," will drain motivation. A voice that regularly says, "You're learning, keep going," will fuel resilience. The words you speak to yourself become the atmosphere you live in. By observing them carefully, you see whether you are living in an atmosphere of growth or of limitation. Unconscious mental habits can be subtle. For instance, some people automatically explain away their achievement. They say to themselves, "That was just luck," or "anyone could have done it." This habit keeps them from building confidence. Others habitually assume the worst before anything happens. They walk into new situations already convinced of failure. This habit creates anxiety and prevents risk-taking. These patterns are not based on the reality of each moment. They are habits that the mind has repeated so often that they now appear as truth. Once you start observing, you may be surprised at how many of your daily actions are guided by these unconscious dialogues. You may notice that you avoid challenges, not because they are impossible, but because your inner voice says, "You can't handle pressure." You may notice that you stay quiet in conversations, not because you have nothing to say, but because your inner voice says, "Your opinion doesn't matter." Each of these realizations is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. The discomfort shows you where growth is needed. The act of observing inner dialogue is not about judging yourself for having negative thoughts. It is about becoming a witness. Imagine sitting in the back of your own mind, listening to the conversations happening there. You don't immediately argue or change them. You simply notice them. This separation between you and your inner voice is powerful. It shows you that you are not the voice itself. You are the one listening. And if you are the one listening, you can choose which voices to follow and which to challenge. Over time, consistent observation leads to clarity. You begin to see patterns like, whenever I face something new, my inner dialogue predicts failure. Or whenever I feel anxious, my inner voice criticizes me instead of calming me. These insights allow you to connect specific habits to specific outcomes. You realize that some of your struggles are not about external circumstances, but about internal narratives. And if they are internal, you have the ability to change them. Practical exercises can strengthen this process. One is to write down your inner dialogue in the moment it appears. Carry a notebook or use your phone. When you notice a strong thought, capture it in words. Over time, you will see themes repeating: self-criticism, fear of rejection, doubt about ability. Another exercise is to speak the dialogue out loud. Hearing your automatic thoughts with your own ears often makes them sound exaggerated or unreasonable, breaking their hold on you.
It is also important to track not only negative dialogue, but positive dialogue. Some habits are unconscious, but supportive. Maybe you automatically say, "I'll figure it out" when faced with difficulty. Maybe you habitually remind yourself, "I've been through worse." These patterns strengthen you. By observing them, you learn which habits to reinforce. Improvement is not just about removing the harmful, but also about building the helpful. The environment you live in influences your inner dialogue. If you are surrounded by constant criticism, your inner voice often mirrors that criticism. If you are around encouragement, your inner voice often reflects that encouragement. By observing your dialogue, you may discover how much of it is not really yours, but borrowed from others, parents, teachers, peers, culture. This realization is freeing because it shows you that your inner voice is not fixed. It has been shaped, and anything shaped can be reshaped. As you uncover unconscious habits, you may also discover conflicts. For example, part of your dialogue might encourage ambition. You can achieve more. Another part may discourage it. Don't aim too high, you'll get hurt. These inner conflicts reveal competing habits formed from different life experiences. Observing them allows you to see the tension clearly and decide which side to strengthen. Without observation, you remain stuck in confusion, pulled in opposite directions, without knowing why. The ultimate goal of observing inner dialogue is to bring unconscious habits into consciousness. When they are unconscious, they control you. When they are conscious, you can evaluate and decide. This shift gives you responsibility for your own mind. It transforms you from a passive follower of old scripts into an active leader of your thoughts. Observing your inner dialogue is not easy. It requires patience and persistence. At first, the thoughts will feel slippery, disappearing before you can capture them. But with practice, you become quicker at noticing. Eventually, you develop the ability to catch thoughts in real time, before they have a chance to dictate your emotions and actions. This awareness becomes a tool you can carry into every part of life. The value of this practice extends beyond personal goals. In relationships, for example, many conflicts come not from what others say, but from how your inner dialogue interprets their words. If your unconscious habit is to assume rejection, you will hear rejection, even when none was intended. By observing this habit, you prevent unnecessary pain and misunderstanding. In work, your dialogue may habitually tell you to stay silent or to avoid risk. Observing this gives you the chance to break free and contribute fully. As you continue to practice, you will notice that your inner dialogue slows down. The mind becomes quieter, not because thoughts disappear, but because you stop reacting blindly to them. You listen, observe, and choose. This calm clarity becomes a foundation for growth. You no longer waste energy fighting unseen habits. Instead, you direct that energy toward deliberate improvement. This process is not about creating a perfect mind. You will always have thoughts that are unhelpful, doubts that appear suddenly, habits that linger. The goal is not elimination, but awareness and choice. With awareness, even the most persistent habit loses its power. With choice, you can direct your life toward the person you want to become. In the end, observing inner dialogue is one of the most practical forms of self-discovery. It shows you the rules your mind has been living by without your permission. It reveals the scripts that explain why you repeat the same mistakes or avoid the same opportunity. It uncovers the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve. And once uncovered, those stories can be rewritten. The mind is always speaking. The question is whether you are listening. If you begin to observe with honesty and patience, you will uncover unconscious habits that explain so much of your present reality. More importantly, you will gain the power to decide which habits to keep, which to release, and which to create anew. This is the path to personal improvement, because real change begins not with the world outside but with the dialogue within.
Chapter 5. Interrupt repetitive thinking that prevents emotional self-regulation. Repetitive thinking is one of the most common traps that keeps people from handling their emotions in a healthy way. The mind gets stuck replaying the same situation, the same worry, the same fear, and instead of finding clarity, the cycle creates more stress and more confusion. Emotional self-regulation becomes impossible when the mind is running in circles. To grow, to strengthen resilience, and to live with balance, it is essential to learn how to interrupt repetitive thinking before it takes control. This cycle often begins with a trigger, an argument, a mistake, a disappointment, or even a memory. The thought rises, "Why did I say that?" or "What if this goes wrong?" And instead of letting it pass, the mind holds onto it. You replay the event from different angles. You predict what might happen next. You try to analyze it endlessly, hoping to feel better. But the more you think, the worse you feel. The brain mistakes repetition for problem solving, yet the problem remains unresolved. What grows is tension, frustration, and sometimes hopelessness. Breaking this cycle starts with recognition. Most people don't notice when repetitive thinking begins. It feels normal to replay situations, but when you pay attention, you can notice the signs. Your thoughts keep circling back to the same subject. You can't focus on the present, your body feels restless or heavy, and your emotions intensify rather than calm down. These are signals that you are caught in repetition. Awareness is the first step to interruption. Once you recognize it, the next step is to step outside the loop. That means creating distance between yourself and the thought. Instead of asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about this?" ask, "What is this thought doing to me right now?" This simple shift moves you from being consumed by the thought to observing it. Observing creates space, and space creates freedom. You begin to see that the thought itself is not the issue. The cycle of returning to it again and again is what drains you. One effective technique is to redirect your attention. The human mind cannot focus deeply on two things at once. If you immerse yourself in a new activity, the repetitive cycle weakens. This doesn't mean distraction for the sake of avoidance. It means giving your mind something constructive to engage with, so it can break free from the loop. Physical movement, writing, or focusing on a specific task are all powerful ways to interrupt repetition. When the loop is broken, emotional balance becomes possible again. Another method is labeling. When the thought returns for the 10th time, instead of wrestling with it, simply say to yourself, "This is repetitive thinking." Naming it strips it of power. You stop confusing repetition with truth. Just because a thought appears again and again does not make it accurate. By labeling it, you remind yourself that frequency is not proof. This calm recognition helps loosen the grip of the cycle. Breathing is also a practical tool. When the mind is trapped in repetition, the body often tightens. Shallow breath, tense muscles, racing heart. By slowing the breath, you send a signal to the nervous system that you are safe. This calms the body and makes it easier to let go of the repeated thought. Deep, steady breathing creates a pause, and in that pause, you can choose a new response instead of sinking deeper into the loop. Repetitive thinking is fueled by the illusion of control. You think that if you keep analyzing, you'll find certainty, but most situations in life do not offer certainty. You cannot control how others respond. You cannot predict every outcome. When you accept this, the urge to repeat weakens. You realize that peace comes not from perfect answers, but from letting go of the need to replay what cannot be changed. Emotional regulation grows stronger when you shift from control to acceptance. A powerful question to use during these moments is this thought helping me move forward? If the answer is no, then it is not worth repeating. This question cuts through the illusion that constant thinking equals progress. True progress comes from clarity, and clarity comes when the mind is allowed to rest. By reminding yourself that not every thought deserves your energy, you give yourself permission to stop feeding the cycle. Another approach is grounding yourself in the present. Repetitive thinking pulls you into the past or the future, rehashing old mistakes or imagining worst-case scenarios. Bringing attention back to the current moment interrupts the cycle. Notice what you see, hear, feel, and touch right now. Anchor yourself in the reality in front of you. When you focus on the present, the repetitive thoughts lose their grip because they thrive only in imagined time, not in actual time. Reframing is also useful, but it must be done carefully. Instead of endlessly asking, "Why did this happen to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of circling around, "I ruined everything," ask, "What can I do differently next time?" This moves your mind from repetition to resolution. The event is no longer a loop to replay, but a lesson to apply. That shift transforms emotion from helplessness to empowerment. When you practice interrupting repetitive thinking consistently, you notice a new level of self-trust. You prove to yourself that you are not powerless against your own mind. You demonstrate that you can guide your attention, calm your emotions, and choose your focus. This builds confidence and resilience. Life's challenges still come, but instead of spiraling into endless thought loops, you regulate your emotions and act with clarity. It is also important to address the triggers that create repetition. Certain situations, relationships, or even environments may repeatedly spark the same cycles. Pay attention to patterns. Do you overthink more after criticism, after conflict, after failure? When you see these patterns, you can prepare in advance. You can remind yourself, this situation usually leads to repetitive thinking. This time I will respond differently. This anticipation reduces the chance of being trapped again. Technology can be both a trigger and a tool. Constant exposure to messages, notifications, and online comparison can fuel endless loops of worry. Setting boundaries, like turning off notifications or limiting time in environments that feed repetition, protects your mind. On the other hand, technology can also help. Meditation apps, journaling tools, and reminders to pause can serve as supports for breaking cycles. The choice of how to use these tools determines whether they serve growth or sabotage. One of the most overlooked aspects of repetitive thinking is its effect on the body. Endless mental loops drain physical energy. They leave you tired, unfocused, and even ill over time. By interrupting them, you not only improve emotional regulation, but also protect your health. When the mind rests, the body recovers. Emotional balance is not just a mental achievement, it is a full body renewal. It is also important to recognize that some repetition comes from unresolved issues. If a thought keeps returning despite your efforts, it may signal something deeper that needs to be addressed. In those cases, rather than pushing it away, face it directly. Ask yourself, what action can I take to resolve this? Sometimes the only way to break a loop is to deal with the root cause. Having a difficult conversation, making a decision, or confronting a fear. Avoidance fuels repetition. Resolution frees you. Community and connection can also play a role. Sharing repetitive thoughts with a trusted friend, mentor, or professional breaks their isolation. Thoughts lose power when spoken aloud. What felt overwhelming in silence often feels manageable when expressed. Others can offer perspectives that cut through the loop and remind you of truths you cannot see in the moment. With practice, you can build a lifestyle that naturally interrupts repetition. Daily reflection, mindfulness, balanced routines, and intentional choices strengthen your ability to regulate emotions. Instead of being dragged into loops, you notice them quickly and act to break them. Over time, this becomes automatic. The same way you once automatically fell into repetitive thinking, you now automatically interrupt it. That is the transformation of habit. Emotional self-regulation is not about suppressing feelings.
It is about creating the space to respond rather than react. Repetitive thinking removes that space by keeping you stuck. By interrupting it, you regain your freedom to choose how you feel and how you act. You build the ability to remain steady in the face of uncertainty. You cultivate peace in moments that once overwhelmed you, and you create a mind that supports your growth instead of sabotaging it. The practice of interrupting repetitive thinking is a lifelong skill. There will always be moments that trigger worry, regret, or overanalysis, but with awareness, tools, and persistence, you can break the cycle each time. Each interruption strengthens your control. Each moment of calm builds resilience. And as you continue, you realize that the greatest victory is not controlling every event in life, but controlling how your mind responds to those events. You are capable of breaking free from repetition. You are capable of regulating your emotions. You are capable of building a mind that supports peace and progress. The cycle does not have to define you. With deliberate practice, you can interrupt it, redirect it, and create a new path forward, one marked by clarity, strength, and steady improvement.
Chapter 6. Strengthen cognitive flexibility to adapt during difficult situations. Life rarely unfolds in a straight line. Plans change, obstacles appear, and unexpected challenges can throw even the strongest person off balance. What separates those who collapse under pressure from those who keep moving forward is not luck, intelligence, or talent. It is flexibility of mind. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to shift perspective, adjust strategies, and adapt to new circumstances without losing direction. It is the mental strength that allows you to face difficult situations and still find a way to progress. When difficulties strike, the first instinct for many is to resist. The mind clings to what should have happened, how things were supposed to go, or how life used to be. This rigidity creates suffering because the situation has already changed, yet the mind refuses to accept it. Cognitive flexibility allows you to release what is gone and adjust to what is present. It helps you pivot instead of staying stuck. Without it, even small setbacks can feel overwhelming. With it, even major challenges become opportunities to learn and grow. Flexibility begins with awareness of your own thought process. Most people assume their perspective is the only one, but when you train yourself to pause and ask, "Is there another way to see this?" you begin to stretch your mind. Imagine losing a job. A rigid perspective says, "This is the end of my career." A flexible perspective says, "This is painful, but it could also be the start of something better." The reality of job loss remains, but your interpretation shifts. That shift changes your emotional state, your decisions, and eventually your future. Difficult situations test your ability to adapt. Unexpected illness, financial struggles, rejection, or failure can all trigger fear and resistance. Cognitive flexibility is not about denying those feelings, but about choosing how to respond after acknowledging them. You can remain frozen, repeating the same approach that no longer works, or you can ask yourself, what else is possible here? What is within my control? What can I adjust? These questions open the door to new options, and options reduce helplessness. One way to strengthen flexibility is to practice shifting perspectives in daily life. When someone disagrees with you, instead of automatically defending your view, try to understand theirs. Ask what they see that you don't. Even if you don't agree, the act of exploring another angle exercises the mental muscle of flexibility. The more you practice in small moments, the stronger you become when bigger challenges arise. Another important skill is to let go of perfection. Rigid minds demand that everything happen according to plan. When it doesn't, frustration explodes. Flexible minds understand that plans are guides, not guarantees. They accept imperfection and adjust accordingly. For example, if you aim to follow a routine perfectly but miss a day, rigidity says, "I failed completely." Flexibility says, "One day doesn't erase progress. I can continue tomorrow." This mindset keeps you moving instead of giving up. Cognitive flexibility also involves creative problem solving. When the usual approach fails, flexibility pushes you to experiment. You ask, what if I try a different method? What if I approach this from another angle? This creativity often leads to solutions that a rigid mind would never discover. For example, a business facing financial strain might initially try to cut costs, but a flexible mindset might instead explore partnerships, new markets, or innovative service. The ability to switch strategies is often the difference between collapse and survival. Flexibility is also connected to emotional regulation. When your thoughts are rigid, your emotions often become extreme. You insist that things must happen in a certain way, and when they don't, anger, despair, or anxiety surge. With flexibility, you allow multiple possibilities, so your emotions remain steadier. You acknowledge disappointment without being destroyed by it. You see challenges without believing they are permanent. This balance allows you to keep making wise choices even under stress. To build cognitive flexibility, practice changing routine. Small acts, like taking a different route to work, trying a new food, or learning a new skill, challenge your brain to adapt. These experiences seem trivial, but they train your mind to be comfortable with change. Over time, you become more resilient when life forces change on you in bigger ways. The willingness to step outside comfort zones daily builds the strength to adapt in crises. A flexible mind is also willing to accept feedback. Rigid thinking resists criticism, assuming it is an attack. Flexible thinking views feedback as information, a tool for growth. When you allow yourself to hear different viewpoints, you expand your awareness and increase your ability to adjust. Instead of clinging to "my way is the only way," you adopt "there might be a better way." This openness accelerates learning and reduces unnecessary conflict. Difficult situations often come with uncertainty. People crave certainty because it feels safe, but life offers no guarantees. Flexibility is the skill of living with uncertainty while still moving forward. Instead of waiting for every detail to be clear, you take action with what you know and adjust as you learn more. This approach creates momentum and prevents paralysis. Those who demand certainty before acting often never act at all. Those who embrace flexibility adapt as they go. Flexibility is not weakness, it is strength. Some confuse it with giving up or being indecisive. In truth, it takes great strength to let go of rigid expectations, to admit when something isn't working, and to try something new. It is easy to cling to the familiar, even when it fails. It is harder to step into the unknown with courage. Flexible people are not easily broken by change because they bend and adjust instead of snapping under pressure. To strengthen this skill, pay attention to your language. Notice when you use rigid words, like always or never. These words lock you into extremes. Replace them with sometimes, maybe, or this time. For example, instead of saying "I always fail at this," say "this time didn't work, but I can adjust." Small changes in language create space for flexibility in thought. Another way to develop flexibility is to focus on what you can control. Rigid minds fixate on uncontrollable factors, what others think, what has already happened, what might go wrong. Flexible minds shift focus to actions they can take now. By redirecting attention to controllable steps, you reduce stress and increase effectiveness. This shift is not just practical, but also empowering, because it reminds you that you are not powerless even in difficult times. Practice flexibility in your goals as well. Set clear intentions, but be willing to adjust how you reach them. For example, if your goal is better health, and an injury prevents your usual workout,
Flexibility helps you find alternative exercises instead of quitting. The destination remains, but the path changes. This mindset ensures progress continues, even when obstacles appear. Cognitive flexibility also involves balancing optimism with realism. A rigid mind may be overly negative, assuming the worst in every scenario, or it may be unrealistically positive, ignoring real risks. Flexible thinking acknowledges challenges, honestly, while maintaining hope. It says, this situation is tough, but I have options. It may take effort, but I can adapt. This balance keeps you grounded yet motivated. Difficult times can feel like walls blocking your way. Flexibility turns those walls into doors. You begin to see that obstacles are not the end, but a signal to change direction. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how can I work with this? That shift turns suffering into growth. It transforms difficulty into resilience. Over time, strengthening cognitive flexibility creates lasting confidence. You stop fearing change because you know you can handle it. You stop resisting challenges because you trust your ability to adapt. This confidence is not arrogance, it is self-trust built through practice. It tells you no matter what comes, I can adjust and keep moving. With this mindset, life's uncertainty no longer feels threatening. It feels manageable. Flexibility also improves relationships. When conflicts arise, rigid thinking demands that one side must win. Flexible thinking seeks understanding and compromise. It asks, how can we both move forward? This mindset reduces tension, builds trust, and creates solutions that benefit everyone. In families, friendships, and workplaces, this skill is invaluable. The truth is, everyone faces difficulty. No life is free from setbacks. What determines the outcome is not the size of the obstacle, but the mindset you bring to it. A rigid mind sees only dead ends. A flexible mind sees new paths. By strengthening cognitive flexibility, you give yourself the gift of resilience, adaptability, and steady progress no matter what happens. Strengthening this ability is a lifelong practice. It requires daily choices, small experiments, and consistent reflection. But the rewards are profound. You gain freedom from the prison of rigid expectations. You gain power to respond with creativity and calm in any situation. And you gain the inner strength to keep improving even when life challenges you most. You have the ability to adapt. You have the ability to shift perspective. You have the ability to change course without losing direction. By strengthening cognitive flexibility, you turn difficult situations into opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more capable. This is not theory, it is a skill you can build day by day until it becomes part of who you are. And once it does, no challenge can stop you from continuing your journey of personal improvement.
Chapter 7. Develop metacognition by reflecting on patterns of thought. Most people go through life caught in their thoughts, without ever pausing to step back and ask where those thoughts come from, why they appear, or how they shape behavior. This is where the practice of metacognition becomes so powerful. Metacognition means thinking about your thinking, reflecting on the patterns that run through your mind, and noticing how they guide your choices. It is the act of becoming aware of the lens you are looking through, instead of just reacting to whatever appears in front of you. When you build this ability, you give yourself the power to reshape your thinking instead of being controlled by it. Reflection on patterns of thought is not about judging yourself or labeling your mind as good or bad. It is about curiosity. It is about stepping back and saying, what kind of thoughts tend to dominate my day? What stories do I repeat to myself? What assumptions do I carry that influence how I feel? This kind of reflection creates distance between you and the automatic stream of mental activity. That distance allows you to see patterns you couldn't see when you were fully immersed in them. Take, for example, someone who always avoids new opportunities. On the surface, it looks like procrastination or lack of courage. But when they reflect on their thoughts, they may notice a repeating pattern. If I try, I might fail. If I fail, people will think less of me. That is not just one thought, it is a habit of thought that has been repeated so often that it feels natural. Metacognition uncovers these habits, and once uncovered, they can be challenged and replaced with healthier ones. Reflection also reveals the tone of your thinking. Some people realize that their inner dialogue is constantly critical. They focus on mistakes, compare themselves unfavorably to others, and minimize their achievements. Others discover that their mind tends toward catastrophizing, imagining the worst possible outcome even in small situations. Still others see that their thoughts are scattered, jumping from one worry to another without focus. These are not isolated events, they are patterns. They have developed through repetition and have become the background noise of daily life. Observing them makes it possible to decide whether they are worth keeping. The value of reflecting on patterns is that it allows you to take responsibility for them. Without reflection, it is easy to assume that your mood is simply caused by circumstance. You think, I'm angry because of what happened, or I'm anxious because of the situation. But when you reflect, you notice that it is often not the event itself, but the pattern of thought around it that creates the emotion. For example, two people might face the same setback. One thinks, this means I'm a failure, and feels crushed. The other thinks, this is a chance to learn, and feels motivated. The event is identical, but the thought pattern creates two very different experiences. Developing metacognition requires practice, because the mind is fast and thoughts appear without invitation. A simple way to begin is to pause at the end of the day and write down recurring thoughts you noticed. Over time you will see themes. Perhaps you constantly think about being judged. Perhaps you often replay mistakes. Perhaps you habitually downplay successes. Seeing these themes on paper gives you perspective. It turns the invisible into the visible, the unconscious into the conscious. Another method is to use questions during the day. When you feel a strong emotion, ask, what was I just thinking? That simple question shifts your attention from the emotion itself to the thought behind it. If you repeat this often, you start noticing that emotions are not random, they follow certain thought patterns. Anxiety may follow a pattern of predicting disaster. Guilt may follow a pattern of harsh self-criticism. Motivation may follow a pattern of encouraging thoughts. Recognizing these links builds awareness and choice. Once you recognize patterns, you can evaluate them. Ask yourself, does this pattern support my goals or undermine them? Does it reflect reality, or is it distorted? Is it helping me grow, or is it keeping me stuck? Many people discover that the patterns dominating their minds were never chosen consciously. They came from childhood, culture, or past experiences. They lingered because they were never examined. Reflection gives you the chance to stop inheriting patterns passively and start choosing them deliberately. Metacognition is also about recognizing when your mind is narrowing your perspective. Often thought patterns lock you into one way of seeing things. Reflection helps you step back and say, is there another way to interpret this? Is there another angle I haven't considered? This expands your possibilities and prevents you from being trapped by one narrow frame of thinking. In difficult times, this flexibility makes the difference between feeling hopeless and finding options. Developing this skill strengthens your ability to learn. When you reflect on how you think, you notice what strategies help you understand better and what habits distract you. For example, you may realize that when you tell yourself, I'll never get this, your motivation collapses,
But when you remind yourself, I can break this down into smaller steps, learning becomes easier. These insights improve not just self-awareness, but practical effectiveness. Reflection also reveals blind spots. Everyone has biases in their thinking, assumptions they rarely question. By stepping back and observing, you catch yourself in these blind spots. Maybe you realize you always assume people's silence means disapproval. Maybe you notice you always interpret challenges as threats rather than opportunities. These discoveries may sting at first, but they are the key to growth. You cannot correct what you cannot see. Metacognition requires patience. The mind resists being observed. Thoughts want to flow automatically, without interference. When you begin reflecting, you may feel uncomfortable, restless, or even critical of yourself for what you discover. But with time, the practice becomes natural. You start to look at your mind the way you look at the sky. You notice clouds passing by without needing to chase or control them. This calm observation creates freedom. As you strengthen metacognition, you also build resilience. When you face setbacks, you don't just feel defeated. You step back and ask, what is my mind telling me about this? Is that thought useful? This prevents you from being swallowed by automatic negativity. You create space to choose a response that aligns with your goal. In this way, reflection becomes a tool for emotional regulation as well as self-improvement. Relationships also benefit. Many conflicts arise not from reality, but from thought patterns that distort reality. For instance, if your pattern is to assume rejection, you might misinterpret someone's busy schedule as a lack of care. If your pattern is to expect criticism, you may hear judgment even in neutral feedback. When you reflect on these patterns, you stop reacting automatically and begin responding thoughtfully. This makes interactions healthier and more genuine. One of the most empowering parts of reflection is realizing that you are not your thoughts. When you observe them, you see that they come and go, often repeating the same scripts. You realize you are the one watching, not the script itself. This separation gives you freedom. Instead of saying, I am a failure, you recognize, I am having the thought that I am a failure. That small shift removes identification and creates room for choice. Practical exercises can make this skill stronger. Journaling, mindfulness meditation, and intentional pauses during the day are all effective. The goal is not to control your thoughts, but to watch them. The more you watch, the more patterns reveal themselves. Over time, you develop the habit of noticing in real time, not just in reflection afterward. This means you can adjust in the moment rather than after the fact. Developing metacognition is not about reaching a final state of perfect thinking. It is about continuous awareness and adjustment. The mind is always evolving, shaped by new experiences. By reflecting regularly, you keep guiding it instead of letting it drift unconsciously. You maintain a sense of direction in the midst of constant change. Ultimately, reflecting on patterns of thought is one of the most practical ways to take control of your life. It uncovers the hidden drivers of your behavior, reveals the stories you've been repeating, and gives you the power to rewrite them. It builds self-awareness, strengthens resilience, and deepens understanding of yourself and others. With this skill, personal improvement is no longer about forcing change blindly. It is about guiding yourself with clarity, awareness, and choice. The ability to think about your thinking is what separates reactive living from intentional living. It transforms challenges into lessons, emotions into signals, and habits into tools for growth. By developing metacognition through reflection, you step into the role of both student and teacher of your own mind. And from that place, true and lasting personal improvement becomes not only possible, but inevitable.
Chapter 8. Replace rigid beliefs with balanced, realistic mental perspectives. Rigid beliefs often form quietly and go unnoticed for years. They are the absolute statements you tell yourself about life, people, and your own abilities. They sound like "I will never be good at this," "people can't be trusted," or "things always go wrong for me." These kinds of beliefs may feel safe because they simplify reality into clear black and white categories, but in truth, they limit growth, create unnecessary suffering, and prevent emotional balance. Personal improvement requires replacing rigid beliefs with perspectives that are balanced, flexible, and grounded in reality. A rigid belief is attractive because it gives the illusion of certainty. If you tell yourself "I always fail," you never have to face the risk of trying again. If you believe "the world is against me," you never have to examine your role in your struggles. If you cling to "I must be perfect to be worthy," you avoid the discomfort of accepting mistakes. But this false sense of certainty comes with a heavy cost. It blocks opportunities, erodes confidence, and locks you in a cycle of frustration. Balanced mental perspectives are not about blind optimism. They're about looking at reality with fairness, without distortion, without exaggeration, and without extremes. They acknowledge challenges while also recognizing possibilities. They accept human imperfection while holding space for growth. For example, instead of saying "I will never be good at this," a balanced perspective says "I'm not skilled yet, but with effort I can improve." Instead of "people can't be trusted," it becomes "some people are untrustworthy, but many are honest and supportive." Instead of "things always go wrong for me," it shifts to "some things don't work out, but I also have successes." These balanced views still acknowledge difficulties, but they don't trap you in absolutes. Replacing rigid beliefs starts with noticing them. Many times they appear in daily language. Pay attention to words like always, never, everyone, and no one. These words are signals of rigidity. If you catch yourself saying "I always mess up," pause and question it. Is it really true that you always fail? Can you name times when you succeeded? By asking these questions, you start to break the spell of rigidity. Reality is rarely absolute, and balanced perspectives almost always include nuance. Another step is to trace where rigid beliefs came from. Often they are not truly your own. They may have come from parents, teachers, cultural expectations, or painful experiences in the past. A person who was harshly criticized as a child may grow into an adult who believes "nothing I do is ever enough." A person betrayed by a friend may adopt "nobody can be trusted." By recognizing the origin, you gain perspective. You see that these beliefs are not universal truths, but learned conclusions, and what is learned can be unlearned. Once you've identified a rigid belief, practice replacing it with a balanced statement. Do not swing to the opposite extreme. If the belief is "I will always fail," don't replace it with "I will always succeed." That is still rigid, and it sets you up for disappointment. Instead, choose something grounded and empowering. Sometimes I fail, but I am capable of learning and improving. Balanced perspectives do not ignore reality. They expand it. They create room for progress without demanding perfection. Balanced thinking also improves emotional stability. Rigid beliefs intensify emotions because they leave no space for flexibility. If you believe "I must never make mistakes," then every mistake feels catastrophic. If you believe "life must be fair," every injustice feels unbearable. Balanced perspectives reduce this intensity by allowing for complexity. If you accept mistakes are part of learning, then mistakes still hurt, but they don't destroy you. If you accept life is not always fair, but I can influence parts of it, then challenges become manageable instead of overwhelming. Balanced perspectives also make relationships healthier. Rigid beliefs about people create conflict and mistrust. If you believe people should always agree with me, then disagreement feels like betrayal. If you believe no one ever understands me, then you stop trying to connect. Replacing these with balanced views,
People will sometimes disagree, but I can still listen and learn, or some may not understand me, but others might if I express myself clearly, create space for communication, compromise and connection. One of the most effective ways to practice balance is reframing extremes into spectrums. Instead of seeing things as all good or all bad, recognize degrees. A failure is not total defeat. It is one event with lessons. A conflict is not proof of a broken relationship. It is a moment that could lead to deeper understanding if handled well. By seeing life in shades, instead of absolutes, you reduce rigidity and increase resilience. Another helpful practice is self-dialogue. When a rigid belief surfaces, respond to it as if you were speaking to a close friend. If a friend said, "I always fail," would you agree, or would you remind them of times they succeeded? Often, you are harsher with yourself than you would ever be with someone else. By speaking to yourself with fairness, you replace rigidity with compassion and accuracy. It is also important to recognize that rigid beliefs are often tied to fear. The fear of rejection creates beliefs like "I must please everyone." The fear of failure creates "I should never take risks." The fear of being hurt creates "I can't let anyone close." By uncovering the fear beneath the belief, you can address the root instead of only the surface. Replacing the belief then becomes easier because you understand what it was protecting you from. Challenging rigid beliefs requires courage. It means letting go of old certainties and stepping into a world of nuance. It means accepting that life cannot be controlled in black and white terms. But in that acceptance comes freedom. You no longer waste energy fighting reality. You adapt, adjust, and keep moving. Balanced perspectives empower you to respond effectively instead of rigidly reacting. Practical exercises can make this process stronger. Journaling about rigid statements you notice in yourself is one. Each time you catch one, write it down and then create a balanced version beside it. Another exercise is to practice curiosity. When you feel rigid, ask, what other explanations are possible? What would someone else see in this situation? Curiosity opens space for balance. Over time, these practices weaken rigid beliefs and strengthen flexible, realistic ones. Replacing rigidity with balance does not mean becoming passive or indecisive. It means making judgments that are fair and grounded. It means holding on to your values while remaining open to new information. It means committing to improvement without demanding perfection. Balanced perspectives give you clarity because they reflect the complexity of real life. They prepare you for change instead of leaving you shocked by it. The impact of this shift is profound. People who replace rigid beliefs with balanced perspectives experience less stress, greater resilience, stronger relationships, and more consistent progress toward their goals. They stop being trapped by absolutes and start living with nuance. They stop sabotaging themselves with impossible demands and start encouraging themselves with realistic expectations. They stop clinging to narrow truths and start opening themselves to wider possibilities. When you practice this consistently, it becomes a habit. You notice rigid statements as they arise, and you instinctively replace them with balanced ones. You stop expecting life to fit into absolutes and start engaging with it as it is, messy, uncertain, but full of potential. This habit builds inner strength. It allows you to handle change, setbacks, and challenges without collapsing into extremes. It gives you a foundation of calm perspective in a world that is always shifting. In the end, replacing rigid beliefs with balanced mental perspectives is about reclaiming freedom. Freedom from absolutes that keep you trapped. Freedom from narrow views that block growth. Freedom from harsh expectations that create shame. With balance, you allow yourself to be human, capable of mistakes, capable of progress, capable of adapting. This is not weakness, it is strength. because it gives you the resilience to face reality with honesty and hope. Your beliefs shape your experience of life. If they are rigid, they will confine you. If they are balanced, they will support you. You have the power to examine them, question them, and reshape them. And each time you replace rigidity with balance, you build a mind that is stronger, wiser, and more aligned with personal improvement. This practice is not done in one day. It is built day by day, thought by thought. But as you practice, you will notice the difference. More calm, more clarity, more growth. That is the reward of balance, and it is within your reach.
Chapter 9. Practice mindfulness to reduce overthinking and mental clutter. The modern mind is constantly pulled in many directions. Thoughts jump from one subject to another without pause. Tasks pile up in endless lists, and worries about the past or the future steal the energy from the present moment. This flood of activity creates mental clutter, leaving people exhausted even when they have done very little. Overthinking adds to this weight by recycling the same concerns repeatedly without finding clarity or resolution. Mindfulness offers a practical way to reduce both overthinking and mental clutter by training attention to rest on the present moment, calmly and without judgment. Mindfulness is not about forcing the mind to be empty or silent. It is about noticing what is happening here and now with clarity. Most overthinking begins because the mind is resisting the present. It says, "I should have done better yesterday," or "what if tomorrow brings disaster?" This constant tug between past and future leaves little energy for the moment that is actually unfolding. When you practice mindfulness, you learn to notice these thoughts without being carried away by them. You acknowledge their presence and gently bring your focus back to what you are experiencing right now. One of the reasons overthinking is so draining is that the brain mistakes it for problem solving. You replay conversations, analyze decisions, and run through worst-case scenarios as if repeating them will create certainty. But certainty rarely comes. Instead, your mind grows restless, emotions intensify, and focus weakens. Mindfulness interrupts this cycle by teaching you to witness the thought without following it. When you observe your mind spinning and simply label it as thinking, you step out of the cycle. You no longer need to solve everything in your head. You allow the thought to rise and fade, the way a wave rises and fades in the ocean. The practice begins with awareness of the senses. By focusing on your breath, the sounds around you, the feeling of your body or the movement of your steps, you anchor yourself in the present moment. These anchors are simple, but they are powerful because they bring your attention away from the endless stream of mental chatter. Each time your mind wanders, you gently return to the anchor. This act is not failure, it is the very practice of mindfulness. It trains you to notice when your mind drifts into overthinking and to guide it back to clarity. Mindfulness also helps with mental clutter by creating space between thoughts. Normally, one thought leads immediately into another, forming an unbroken chain. Before you realize it, you are lost in stories and assumptions. Mindfulness slows this process. By pausing to observe a single thought, you prevent it from pulling you into a storm of more thoughts. Over time, this creates a mind that is less crowded and more spacious. In this space, calmness grows naturally. Another benefit of mindfulness is emotional regulation. Overthinking often magnifies emotions. A small worry becomes a heavy burden because the mind keeps replaying it. Mindfulness allows you to notice the worry without inflating it. For example, if you feel anxious, instead of repeating, "This anxiety will never go away," you simply notice, "I am feeling anxious right now." This simple acknowledgement reduces resistance, and with less resistance, the emotion loses intensity. You learn that feelings come and go like passing weather, and you do not need to cling to them or fight them. A common barrier to mindfulness is the belief that it requires long hours of meditation. While meditation is a powerful tool, mindfulness can also be practiced in small moments throughout the day. You can be mindful while washing dishes, feeling the warm water and the motion of your hand. You can be mindful while eating, noticing the taste, texture, and rhythm of each bite instead of rushing through a meal. You can be mindful while walking, paying attention to each step instead of letting your mind wander endlessly. These simple practices gradually train the brain to stay present, and staying present reduces clutter and overthinking. Overthinking often disguises itself as productivity. You believe that by thinking through every possibility, you are preparing for success. But in reality, endless thinking often replaces real action. Mindfulness helps break this illusion. When you are mindful, you notice when planning crosses the line into rumination. You remind yourself that real progress comes from doing, not from rehearsing every outcome in your head. By stepping into the present, you gain the clarity to act instead of spinning in circles. Mental clutter also arises from constant external stimulation. Notifications, conversations, entertainment, and endless information overload the mind with more than it can process. Mindfulness acts as a filter, helping you decide what deserves attention. When you pause to ask, "Is this worth my focus right now?" you create order in the chaos. You stop feeding your mind with unnecessary noise and start feeding it with clarity. This selective attention reduces the buildup of clutter and strengthens your ability to focus deeply when needed. One of the hidden benefits of mindfulness is greater self-awareness. As you practice observing thoughts and feelings, you begin to notice patterns. Perhaps you see that you often overthink after social interactions, replaying conversations in your head. Or you notice that clutter builds when you avoid decisions and let small tasks pile up. These insights allow you to make adjustments, not just in your mind but in your habits and environment. Over time, mindfulness becomes not just a practice of calmness, but a practice of self-understanding. Mindfulness also nurtures patience. Overthinking is driven by urgency. The mind demands answers now, certainty now, resolution now. But many aspects of life cannot be solved instantly. Mindfulness teaches you to sit with uncertainty, to allow questions to exist without rushing to answer them. In this patience, clarity often arises naturally. Problems that seemed overwhelming often shrink when given time and calm attention, instead of frantic repetition. When mental clutter is reduced, creativity expands. A cluttered mind has little room for fresh ideas because it is too busy replaying the old ones. Mindfulness clears space for new connections to form. By focusing on the present moment, you free the brain from unnecessary loops, allowing inspiration and problem-solving to emerge more easily. Many people find that their best ideas come not when they are overthinking, but when they are fully present, in nature, in quiet, or in simple daily activities. Relationships also benefit from mindfulness. Overthinking often distorts communication. You replay what someone said, attach meanings that may not be there, or anticipate rejection before it happens. This creates tension and distance. Mindfulness helps you listen fully, without judgment or assumption. When you are present with another person, you respond to what is actually being said, not to the clutter of imagined stories in your head. This presence deepens trust and connection. Developing mindfulness is a gradual process. At first, you may only notice how restless your mind is. You may realize how much you live in the past or future, how often your thoughts spiral into clutter. This awareness may feel discouraging, but it is actually progress. Noticing the noise is the beginning of quieting. With consistent practice, even a few minutes each day, you will begin to experience moments of calm clarity. These moments grow with time, until mindfulness becomes a natural part of how you live. It is important to remember that mindfulness is not about perfection. Thoughts will always arise. The goal is not to eliminate them, but to change your relationship with them. Instead of clinging to them or pushing them away, you simply notice them. This balanced approach prevents overthinking, because you no longer get trapped in the loop.
You observe, acknowledge, and return to the present. That simple act is the foundation of peace. As mindfulness deepens, life itself feels different. Ordinary experiences become richer. Eating, walking, working, or talking all carry a new quality of presence. Instead of rushing through each moment, you inhabit it fully. This slows the pace of your mind, reduces the pressure of constant thought, and increases your appreciation for the small details of life. Gratitude grows naturally when you are mindful, and gratitude itself is one of the most powerful antidotes to overthinking and clutter. In times of stress, mindfulness becomes a lifeline. When your mind wants to spin with worry, you return to your breath. When your emotions want to spiral, you return to the present. This practice doesn't remove challenges, but it gives you stability in the middle of them. You stop being swept away by every thought and instead stand grounded in awareness. This stability is the foundation of emotional resilience. Practicing mindfulness consistently transforms not only how you think, but how you live. You stop reacting to every thought as if it were urgent. You stop drowning in clutter. You begin to experience calm, clarity, and focus even in the middle of a busy life. Overthinking loses its grip. Because you know how to return to the present, clutter fades. Because you no longer feed it with unnecessary attention. You do not need to wait for the perfect time to begin. Mindfulness is available in every moment, in every breath, in every action. Each time you bring your attention back to now, you take a step toward clarity. Each time you observe your thoughts without chasing them, you reduce the hold of overthinking. Each time you anchor yourself in the present, you create space for peace. The mind can either be a noisy room filled with endless chatter, or a clear space where you can see what matters. Mindfulness is the practice of choosing the latter. It is the practice of gently training yourself to live with awareness instead of distraction, with presence instead of constant analysis. And in that choice, you find freedom. The freedom to focus, to feel, to live without being buried under the weight of your own thoughts.
Chapter 10. Integrate healthier thought patterns into lasting behavioral change. Change does not come from good intentions alone. Many people recognize negative thought patterns and even succeed in replacing them with healthier ones for a short period of time. But without consistent integration, those new patterns fade and old habits return. The real work of personal improvement is not just noticing your thoughts or reframing them in the moment. The real work is embedding those healthier patterns so deeply that they naturally shape behavior day after day. This process transforms temporary motivation into lasting change. Integrating healthier thought patterns begins with repetition. The brain learns through practice, not through one-time insight. You cannot expect one new perspective to erase years as conditioned thinking. Just as physical exercise builds muscle through repetition, mental exercise builds resilience through consistent use. When you notice yourself thinking, "I can't do this," and replace it with "I can learn to do this with effort," one time, that is progress. But when you repeat this replacement hundreds of times, it becomes automatic. The repetition rewires your brain, and what once felt forced becomes your new normal. A critical part of integration is linking thoughts to action. If you replace a negative thought but fail to act on the new perspective, the change remains shallow. For example, if you shift from "I'll embarrass myself if I speak up" to "I can share my view and contribute," but still stay silent, the old behavior continues. True integration happens when the healthier thought drives new behavior. You speak up, you contribute, you take action. Each action reinforces the thought until the two become inseparable. Thought and behavior feed each other, and both grow stronger. Consistency is essential. You cannot build lasting change by practicing only when it feels convenient. Healthy thought patterns need to be integrated into daily routines. This might mean starting your morning by reviewing constructive reminders, pausing midday to check your inner dialogue, or reflecting at night on how your thoughts guided your action. These daily practices form the scaffolding that supports long-term integration. Without them, even the best insights fade under the weight of daily stress. One obstacle people face is relapse into old thinking. This is natural because older patterns have been rehearsed for years. The key is not to see relapse as failure, but as part of the process. Each time you notice yourself slipping back, you have another opportunity to practice correction. Over time, the slips become less frequent and less intense. Eventually, the new patterns dominate. Lasting change is built not by perfection, but by persistence. Another important element of integration is identity. If you only see healthier thoughts as techniques to use occasionally, they remain external to who you are. But when you begin to see them as part of your identity, they become permanent. For example, instead of saying, "I am trying to think positively," you begin to say, "I am someone who chooses balanced and constructive perspectives." This shift from doing to being cements the pattern. Your behavior naturally aligns with your identity, and your identity is strengthened by repeated behavior. Environment also plays a powerful role in integration. If you surround yourself with people who constantly reinforce negative thinking, your healthier patterns will struggle to grow. But if you seek out environments that encourage growth, resilience, and constructive dialogue, your new patterns gain reinforcement. Integration does not happen in isolation. The people you spend time with and the environments you choose either nourish or weaken your progress. Choose carefully, because integration is easier when your surroundings support it. It is also helpful to create tangible reminders of healthier patterns. This might be a phrase written on your desk, an alarm on your phone that asks you to check your thinking, or a journal where you record examples of constructive thoughts leading to positive actions. These reminders keep the patterns active in your awareness until they become ingrained. Without reminders, it is too easy to slip back into automatic thinking. With them, you stay conscious long enough for integration to take root. The connection between healthier thought patterns and lasting behavioral change becomes clear when you examine small daily habits. Consider exercise. A negative pattern might say, "I don't have the discipline to stay consistent." Replacing it with, "I can build discipline through small steps," is the first shift. But real integration happens when that thought pushes you to actually move your body, even when motivation is low. Over weeks and months, the thought and behavior fuse into a new lifestyle. At that point, you no longer debate whether you are disciplined, you live it. Another example is in relationships. A rigid belief might say, "If someone disagrees with me, they don't respect me." A healthier pattern reframes this as, "Disagreement can lead to better understanding." But the real transformation comes when you actually practice listening during conflict, rather than shutting down or lashing out. When you consistently act on this healthier thought, it becomes part of your relational style. You begin to trust yourself in difficult conversations because your actions have proven the belief true. Integration also requires patience. Many people want rapid transformation, but lasting change is gradual. You may not notice the shift day to day, but over time, small adjustments compound. One day you realize that what used to trigger negativity no longer does. What once required conscious effort now feels natural. Patience allows you to keep practicing, even when results seem invisible. Without patience, you risk abandoning the process before it has time to work. Reflection strengthens integration as well. By regularly reviewing your progress, you reinforce the new pattern. At the end of each week, ask yourself, where did my healthier thoughts guide me to better actions? Where did I still fall into old habits? This reflection prevents you from drifting and reminds you of how far you've come. Seeing evidence of progress increases motivation and makes it easier to continue. It is also important to align healthier thought patterns with your deeper values. If you adopt new patterns that contradict what truly matters to you, they will not last. But if you tie them to your core values, growth, integrity, compassion, or responsibility, they become deeply meaningful. For example, reframing "I can't handle challenges" into "facing challenges helps me live with integrity and strength" ties the thought to a personal value. This makes it far more likely to endure. Integration is not about eliminating all negative thoughts forever. No one can do that. Negative thoughts will still appear. The difference is that they no longer control you. Healthier patterns become strong enough to guide your actions, even when negativity whispers in the background. You acknowledge the old thought, but you choose the new one. This ability to choose consistently is what creates lasting behavioral change. Lasting change also requires flexibility. Life is dynamic, and the thought patterns that serve you today may need adjustment tomorrow. Integration does not mean rigidity, it means embedding the practice of examining and adjusting your thoughts as life evolves. When new challenges arise, you apply the same process. Notice the thought, evaluate it, replace it with something constructive, and act on it. By doing this repeatedly, you ensure that your patterns remain aligned with growth throughout your life. The long-term reward of integrating healthier thought patterns is freedom. Freedom from cycles of self-sabotage, freedom from the weight of rigid beliefs, freedom from the clutter of repetitive negativity. This freedom does not mean life becomes easy. Challenges will always come, but with integrated patterns, you meet those challenges with clarity, resilience, and purpose. Your thoughts no longer undermine your goals, they reinforce them. Integration is the bridge between knowledge and transformation. Many people learn about healthier ways of thinking, but never practice them long enough to become habits. As a result, their lives remain unchanged. But those who commit to integration experience a deeper shift. They no longer have to force positivity or remind themselves constantly. Their minds naturally lean toward balance, resilience, and growth. And when the mind changes, behavior follows. This process creates a cycle of empowerment. Healthier thoughts lead to healthier actions. Healthier actions create better results. Better results reinforce healthier thoughts. Over time, this upward spiral replaces the downward cycles of negativity. Each choice strengthens the next, and momentum builds. What began as deliberate effort becomes second nature, and second nature becomes identity. Integrating healthier thought patterns into lasting behavioral change is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong practice, built moment by moment, choice by choice. It requires repetition, action, consistency, patience, reflection, and alignment with values. But the rewards are profound. You gain not just better thoughts, but a better life. You build not just temporary motivation, but lasting resilience. And you prove to yourself, day after day, that change is not only possible but sustainable. The true measure of personal improvement is not what you think for one moment, but what you consistently think and do over time. By integrating healthier thought patterns, you create that consistency. You build a foundation that carries you through difficulty and into growth. You shape a mind and a life that reflect not your old limitations, but your new possibilities. This is lasting change, and it is within your reach.